It's time now to take a look at what else has been making headlines this week. To do that, we are joined by Kylie Moore-Gilbert, author and Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies scholar. Kylie Moore-Gilbert, it's great to have you back on Weekend Breakfast. Thank you.
Thanks for having me back. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year to you. Now let's start off with Iran. There have been questions about Iran's regard for human life in general and condemnation of Iran, not only with the ongoing protests that are happening there and the executions of protesters, this article in Sky News talking about that, but also the execution of the former defence official Ali Raza Akbari as well that Fawzia just mentioned. A lot of international condemnation about those two stories.
There's a lot of condemnation, yes, but unfortunately there's not too much action. And everybody has been watching the UK's response this morning following the quite shocking execution of somebody who's a dual UK citizen. And so far it's been pretty lacklustre. The ambassador's coming back for consultations and one person has been sanctioned. It's not enough, and the Australian government should be doing more as well. It's utterly shocking, the number of executions and the number of people who've been sentenced to death, some of them still in their teenage years by this regime, basically as a means of installing fear in the population and trying to force them back into their homes and stop protesting after more than 4 months of unrest.
You mentioned there that sanctions have already been placed on certain individuals in Iran. The Australian government has joined in with those sanctions as well, and with the condemnation as well. But you also mentioned that the Australian government should be doing more. What else do you see that Canberra can be doing?
We've actually really been lagging behind partner countries like Canada, the US, the UK, and the European Union as well. They have sanctioned sometimes up to thousands of Iranian individuals and institutions. We've sanctioned a handful, less than 10 actually, in response to these human rights abuses. Also, a number of parliaments around the world are actively debating and even passing laws to prescribe the Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terror organisation. The UK House of Commons actually passed a motion only a few days earlier, which was unanimous, calling on the UK government to list the IRGC as a terror group. Canada has also taken these measures. The EU Parliament's in the process of doing so too, and the US a number of years ago actually already sanctioned them and listed them as a terror group. So Australia, is really lagging behind, and that's something that we can absolutely do, which would prevent people within Australia from sending money to the IRGC or expressing support for the group at all.
Right.
And this group has been the main group behind the brutality and violence on the streets, which has seen so many killed, wounded or maimed.
Yeah.
Let's move on, Kylie, to this story out of the Telegraph, and this is about the classified documents being found in possession, in Joe Biden's possession, the US president. We've got a story this morning, again, with more documents being found at his home in Delaware. There has been a strong attack from the Democrats against Donald Trump for a similar charge. Does this nullify that attack line for the Democrats?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think it does to a certain extent, or at least muddies the waters. Obviously, there's a distinction between Biden's behaviour and Trump's behaviour. Trump actively tried to cover this up. He actively tried to prevent agents from entering his Mar-a-Lago home to recover the documents. He lied about it. Biden's been very upfront, and it was Biden's team himself who came forward with this. But it does muddy the waters. How can the Democrats and Biden's team now attack Trump over this and also push for a criminal prosecution of Trump if Biden has essentially done the same thing? So I think the political implications are really interesting. I also think that a whole lot of former American vice presidents and presidents are now scrambling to check the contents of their garage to see, what confidential files they might have stored away by mistake there too. So I think definitely watch this space because we'll see more development.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my exact thought when I thought, when I read this article as well. I thought, well, how far back do you need to go, and why are these documents still in their possession? Is it one of those cases where, someone else packs up the office, shall we say, a removalist or something, and then just dumps everything in a case and then it gets stored away somewhere else? But the question here too is, who can you trust with national security?
I agree. I think it plays really, really badly. I mean, Biden won unexpectedly, an unexpected number of seats in the midterm elections recently, and the Democrats were on a high following this. And I think this very much, puts paid to the notion that the Democrats are somehow more trustworthy on matters of confidentiality and national security, given now that Biden's been smeared with the same brush as Trump. And it really doesn't look good and erodes trust in politics overall.
No.
Let's speak about this final article out of The Guardian, an absolutely remarkable story about this couple who had drifted out to sea while paddleboarding, but they were found. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I love a good survival story, and this was just amazing. They managed to survive for 3 days in shark-infested waters off the coast of Queensland, drifting 55 kilometres away from their initial starting point, and somehow managed to lose their paddleboard along the way as well, and were found, up to their necks, just barely floating, horrific state, barely being able to keep their heads above water and calling out for help, and a fisherman eventually picked them up. I thought this was just a remarkable story of courage and survival, and I'm really happy that it has a happy ending.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an incredible
My
tale.
biggest nightmare, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Dr. Kylie Moore-Gilbert, it's great to have you on Weekend Breakfast again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for your time, Guy.